Hi, I'm Aileen, and 5 days before they thought I'd die, I heard my husband and sister whisper over my hospital bed, "Good, she'll finally be out of the way. Her house, her money, it'll all be ours." They were holding my hand when they said it, smiling, and the moment the door closed behind them, I knew I wasn't dying. I was being erased. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I turned to the cleaning lady, and I whispered, "Help me, and I'll make you rich." Now tell me, what would you have done if the people you loved the most planned your funeral like it was a payday? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where in the world are you tuning in from? Leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The room felt smaller when I woke up again, as if the walls had eased in while I drifted in and out. The late afternoon light from the hallway kept slipping across the floor, and every time it did, I remembered the same sentence: 5 days. It didn't matter how quietly the doctor had said it. It clung to me like humidity in a Texas summer, thick, inescapable, sitting on my chest. I lay there trying to swallow the truth, tasting metal in my mouth, telling myself to breathe slowly, even though my ribs felt tight. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling more than I wanted to admit. I tried texting my son again. He lived in California now. We hadn't spoken properly in almost a year, but hope is a stubborn thing. I typed a simple message, erased it, typed another, and still couldn't bring myself to hit send. I set the phone down, staring at it, like it might open up and give me the version of life I wished I still had. The room smelled like disinfectant and old air vents. Machines hummed their usual monotonous rhythm, steady, uncaring. It made me think about my own house back in Memorial Park, the one I'd poured years into shaping. I used to walk through those rooms with bare feet on the hardwood and feel like I'd built something steady, something mine. I put my career aside for Garrick because we agreed marriage was a partnership. I told myself sacrifice was a contribution, not a loss. But lying in that bed with the taste of fear and regret on the back of my tongue, I wasn't sure anymore. I tightened my grip around the silver blue handkerchief I kept close. Soft, worn. It was the only thing in the room that didn't feel cold. I held it until my breathing evened out a little. That was when I heard the door open. I stayed still. I didn't have the strength to pretend I was okay, so keeping my eyes shut felt safer. I recognized Garrick's cologne before I heard his voice, a muted cedar smell he always overused. My sister Shanda walked in with him. She never bothered hiding the clicking of her heels, even in a hospital. They stopped near my bed. I felt Garrick lean in before he spoke. "So it's really 5 days?" he murmured. There wasn't sorrow in his tone, just certainty. Shanda answered with a pleased exhale. Then Garrick said the sentence that froze the room solid. "Good. Her house and that $288 million will finally be ours." Shanda let out this soft little laugh, the kind she used whenever she thought she'd outsmarted someone. She squeezed my hand where it rested on the blanket, but it wasn't affection. It was triumph. Like she'd already pocketed the keys to everything I ever owned. I stayed still. My pulse thudded against my fingers. I didn't flinch, didn't twitch, just listened, letting their voices carve into me. You think you've seen betrayal in movies or books, but when it walks into a quiet hospital room wearing your last name and your bloodline, it's different. It hits in a place you didn't know existed. They talked for a few more seconds, low, greedy, confident. Not once did they say my name with anything resembling tenderness. And then they walked out, still whispering, still smiling. The door clicked shut. I opened my eyes slowly. I didn't cry, didn't make a sound. I stared at the ceiling tiles until they stopped blurring. I thought dying was the thing that scared me. Turns out, it wasn't the end that terrified me. It was leaving behind everything I'd built for people who had waited like vultures for the moment my body gave out. My mind took off without my permission. I saw my grandparents' old ranch in my memory, how they trusted me with the land. I remembered the investments I'd made long before I ever became someone's wife. The Colorado property I bought on a whim when my heart still felt young enough to choose adventure. All of it sat in a tangled circle around me now, threatened by the two people I thought were family. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "They've been waiting for this." The door opened again, but the footsteps were softer this time, methodical, quiet. Beata stepped in, the cleaning cart rolling in front of her. She'd worked on this floor for months. Always polite, always moving with the kind of tired grace that only people who work double shifts develop. She paused when she saw my expression. "You need water?" she asked gently. I didn't want to scare her, but I also couldn't pretend anymore. "Could you close the door for a moment?" She hesitated, searching my face, then pushed the door until it latched. The hallway noises faded instantly. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "I need help," I said softly. "Serious help." She folded her hands in front of her, waiting, not rushing me, not crowding me. "Beata," my throat tightened. "If you help me, I'll give you $7 million. You'll never have to work another day in your life." She blinked hard, like she thought the fluorescent lights were playing tricks on her. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. I could see her thinking about her son she mentioned once, the bills she struggled with, the family she worried about in Poland. "I'm not delirious," I whispered. "I just can't trust the people who should have protected me." She searched my face again, slower this time, as if listening for something unspoken. "What do you need?" she finally asked, voice low, almost afraid of being overheard. Relief washed over me in a steady wave. Not because she agreed for the money, but because she was the only person in this building looking at me without expectation or entitlement. "I need someone they won't notice," I said. "Someone they'd never suspect." She nodded once, determined now, her earlier shock shifting into resolve. My thoughts were already racing ahead. I had to reach my attorney. I had to secure the original trust papers. I had to leave a record, something undeniable, if things went wrong. Fear didn't vanish, but it moved aside, making space for something sharper. 5 days, 5 chances, 5 windows where every hour mattered. I looked toward the hallway where Garrick and Shanda had disappeared moments earlier. My breathing steadied. The handkerchief wasn't crushed in my fist anymore. I folded it carefully, smoothing the lines. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. So the first thing I did was ask Beata to help me find a phone no one could trace. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded and left the room with that calm, steady walk of someone who's seen far too much to be rattled by whispers. About 20 minutes passed. In that time, the hospital shifted from late afternoon to early evening. The hallway lights dimmed, the sounds softened, visitors trickled out. My mind didn't rest. I kept replaying Garrick's voice in my head, every syllable scraping across my nerves like sandpaper. When the door creaked open again, Beata returned holding something small in her palm. "I found this," she said, almost in a whisper, glancing over her shoulder. A teenage boy dropped it earlier in the hallway. No name, no lock screen. I picked it up for lost and found, but no one came back for it. It was an old flip phone. Cheap. Outdated. Exactly what I needed. She handed it to me like it was a secret. The plastic felt warm in my palm, like it had held someone else's urgency before mine. I flipped it open, pressed the power button, and waited. The screen lit up with a basic menu. No apps, just calls and texts. Somehow that made me feel more in control than I had in hours. I whispered, "Thank you," and she nodded once before slipping back out into the corridor, her cartwheels squeaking faintly as they disappeared. I dialed my attorney's private number, one I hadn't used in over 8 years, but never forgot. My heart thudded as the call rang once, twice, then sent me to voicemail. "It's urgent," I said quietly. "Don't call my regular phone. I'll explain later." I hung up just as a shadow crossed the frosted glass of the door. A soft knock followed and a nurse poked her head in. "Hi, Mrs. Vaughn. Just checking in. Your husband mentioned he might stop by again tonight. Said he wanted to see how you're doing." I managed a polite nod. "Did he ask about anything else?" She hesitated, then said, if you'd signed any updates today, something about documents." A tightness cinched around my ribs. I forced a small smile. "I haven't signed anything." "Okay, just passing it along. Let us know if you need anything." She left, and the room grew quiet again. But my mind started spinning. Why was he asking about signatures? Why now? Suddenly, I remembered something from last spring. Garrick had asked, too casually, about my investment accounts during dinner. That wasn't like him. He never cared before. He used to act like financial talk bored him. Said it was my thing. And now? I reached for the prepaid phone again. Using the hospital's guest Wi-Fi and the browser, slow as molasses but working, I logged into my private investment portal. Garrick never knew I memorized the credentials. He thought the accounts were closed years ago when I shifted assets. The screen took a few seconds to load. When it did, a chill spread from my chest to my fingers. 2 weeks ago, there was a flagged attempt to request power of attorney on my behalf. It had been denied. The system had flagged the signature mismatch. I scrolled further. Garrick had accessed one of our joint accounts at 2:17 a.m. and again at 4:41 a.m., twice in the same week. I remembered the way he started offering to handle the bills earlier this year, told me I needed to relax more. He even made a scene at a gala, suddenly charming our financial advisor, a man Garrick had always said was too uptight. And then there was Shandaw. Last month she asked, "Do you ever get confused signing all that paperwork, Aileen?" I'd lose track with all those forms. They weren't random comments. They were rehearsed, planned. They were preparing for this, not reacting to the diagnosis. They'd been counting on it. I leaned back against the pillows, pulse in my ears. The pieces didn't just fit. They snapped together too perfectly. Then another memory surfaced. Months ago, I'd ignored a voicemail from Marcia, a former coworker. She'd left the company under a cloud of burnout and frustration, and I hadn't kept in touch. But she called out of the blue one afternoon. Back then, I didn't want drama. I dismissed it. But now, I opened the hospital Wi-Fi browser again and accessed my email archive. The voicemail had been transcribed into text and stored. I found it and pressed play. Her voice was shaky but firm. "Aileen, it's Marcia. Look, I don't want to freak you out, but I saw something last year that didn't sit right. Garrick met with a man, looked like a lawyer, at lunch, and they were going over what looked like estate documents. He was talking like you weren't around anymore. Please don't ignore this. Just be careful." I listened twice. Then I sat there in silence. He wasn't grieving. He was planning. This wasn't new. This wasn't born out of panic. This had been set in motion long before the test results came in. I whispered out loud, "They didn't react to the diagnosis. They celebrated it." The idea sat in my chest like a stone. I needed more than just outrage. I needed proof. I needed the original trust paperwork, documents they didn't know I'd updated. I needed to find the pattern in what they were doing. I needed someone invisible in their eyes, someone like Beata. She returned shortly after with a cup of ice water, probably a cover. I motioned for her to come closer and handed her a folded note. Could you quietly get a copy of the visitor log from the front desk? I said under my breath. She frowned slightly, but her eyes stayed focused. I can try. Tell them it's for routine sanitization follow-up. They'll buy that. She nodded, slipped the note into her apron pocket, and walked away like it was just another trash run. This wasn't just about today. This was about the last year, maybe longer. The questions Garrick asked, the way Shanda hovered, the papers I signed under the illusion of care. As the hallway grew darker and visiting hours wound down, I leaned back, my gaze drifting to the silver-blue handkerchief beside me. I didn't need to crush it anymore. I folded it gently and laid it on the side table. The shaking had stopped. And then, just before midnight, my attorney finally called me back. The room was dim except for the glow from the monitor above my bed, and the hallway outside had turned quiet in that particular way hospitals do when the day exhales. I lifted the prepaid phone to my ear the moment it buzzed. His voice was low and tense, and the first thing he asked was whether I was safe. That tone alone told me more than any long explanation could have. Lyle was not a man who rattled easily. He was measured, calm, even when dealing with clients who panicked over tax codes and estate filings. But tonight, there was an edge under every word. "I'm alone," I whispered. "And yes, I'm conscious. I know exactly what's going on." He paused. "Before we go any further, do you feel well enough to understand what I'm about to say?" I swallowed, feeling my pulse push against my throat. "Tell me." "I need to be honest with you, Aileen. I've been trying to reach you for months." Those words landed like a slab on my chest. I sat up straighter, using the remote to adjust the bed so I wasn't lying flat. "Reach me for what?" "For something that didn't look right," he said. "Something filed in your name that I immediately doubted." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Lyle, I overheard Garrick and Shanda. I know they've been planning something, and I know it didn't start today." Another pause, a heavy one. "I was afraid of that," he finally said. The air in the room felt dense, as if the walls leaned in closer, just to listen. He continued, choosing each word carefully. "Earlier this year, a scanned document was submitted to revoke part of your original living trust. The signature resembled yours, but certain details didn't match. I rejected it. A few days later, the record was deleted from the online archive." "I never saw anything about that," I said quietly. "You wouldn't have. When I tried calling you, your husband answered your main phone. He said you were resting and would review the matter later." A cold rush moved up my arms. "He intercepted it." "I kept a backup copy," Lyle added. "I didn't trust the circumstances." My cheeks warmed with a humiliation that felt personal. I'd let Garrick handle small things over the years. Emails, bills, reminders, thinking it was harmless. Trusting him had become muscle memory. I took a breath and forced it out slowly. Would that revocation have benefited anyone? "Yes," he said. "If approved, it would have transferred primary control of your estate to Garrick in the event you became incapacitated." The words landed like a punch I had to absorb silently. "They were waiting for me to be incapacitated," I whispered. Lyle didn't deny it. The quiet on the line was confirmation enough. He then asked, "Do you remember approving a meeting with a man named Wyatt Crane?" The name meant nothing to me. "No, never heard of him." "Well," he said, shifting papers on his end, "your husband knows him. Garrick met with him last fall. Crane is known for bending estate guidelines and helping spouses reposition assets. Not illegally, but dangerously close." A memory surfaced. Garrick's so-called business trip to Dallas last year. He came home upbeat, unusually warm, saying the meetings had gone his way for once. I hadn't thought much of it. Now it made sense. "Tell me what I can undo," I said, hearing a more defined strength in my voice than I expected. "Everything," he replied, As long as we move quickly and quietly, we'll need updated trust documents. We'll need to confirm the hospital hasn't listed your husband as emergency decision maker. We also need to establish a record that you are mentally sound enough to make decisions." "That won't be a problem," I said. My mind was clearer right now than it had been in years. "And Aileen," he added, lowering his voice even more, "you must assume they're watching. If they believe you have 5 days left, they might accelerate whatever they've planned." I glanced toward the doorway. The light from the hall spilled across the floor like a thin stripe. A few footsteps echoed from somewhere down the corridor. People moving, people listening. I wrapped my fingers around the blanket, grounding myself. "Lyle," I said, "I have someone inside the hospital helping me." "Oh?" His tone carried skepticism. "A woman named Beata. She works quietly. They barely notice her. She's been looking out for me." "That may turn out to be very important," he said, "but be cautious. Trust must be earned slowly right now." When the call ended, I kept the phone cupped in my hands for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation settle. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with realization. I'd spent years defending Garrick's choices, smoothing over his dismissive remarks, telling myself marriage required patience. I told myself Shandaw's cutting comments came from jealousy or stress, not malice. But tonight, all the excuses I'd built crumbled. The truth stood bare. They didn't want me healed. They wanted me gone. The fear I felt earlier began to shift, turning into something steadier. Anger sharpened into clarity. I sat taller, not because I felt better, but because I finally saw the situation for what it was. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought they could wait me out. The hallway outside grew still again. A cart rolled past, then stopped. Soft steps approached my door, deliberate and slow, as if someone was listening first before coming in. I slid the flip phone under the blanket and tightened my grip. The handle turned, and the door opened. Standing there wasn't a nurse. It was my sister. Shanda stood there smiling, holding paperwork she clearly didn't want me to read. She stepped into the room as if she belonged there, her perfume hitting me before her voice did, something strong and sweet, like it was trying too hard. The morning sun cut across the floor in neat lines, lighting half the room and making everything feel too clear, too exposed. She shut the door gently behind her, like she didn't want to wake someone, even though I was wide awake, sitting up, and very much expecting trouble. "Hey," she said, tilting her head with fake warmth. "You look a little better today. Maybe we can go over something real quick?" She raised the folder in her hands, just enough for me to see the edge of official-looking documents inside. But she didn't hand it to me. I didn't smile back. "What is it?" "Oh, nothing big. Just some routine authorizations the hospital needs, updating signatures and whatnot. They've changed some procedures lately with all this legal compliance stuff." She walked to the side of my bed like she'd done it a dozen times before. But she hadn't. Shanda didn't do hospitals. She did polished brunches and judgmental glances across holiday tables. She laid the folder on my lap with care that felt choreographed. I opened the first page. The language wasn't routine. It was a supplemental directive. If I signed it, Garrick would be granted temporary authority over my medical and estate decisions if I were deemed decision impaired. I stared at the document, then looked up at her. "The hospital asked for this?" She nodded too fast. "Yes, absolutely. It's just policy. You know how they are with liability these days." Her voice was coated in syrup. I let my fingers trace the margin of the paper, pretending to consider it. "Did Garrick tell you to bring these?" Her pause was half a second too long. "Of course not. I'm just trying to help. Make things easier on you." I set the page down calmly. "I see." She kept her tone light, but I could see her watching me carefully. Every small movement, every blink. I picked up the next sheet. More legal jargon, more embedded traps. I said nothing, just flipped pages slowly, one by one. "You're quiet," she said, laughing softly. "Don't overthink it. You're sick, Aileen. You don't need this stress. Let us take care of you." That phrase, it turned in my chest like a dull knife. Let us take care of you. How often had that line been used to sedate someone into compliance? I'd heard it when Garrick talked to our accountant, when Shanda spoke to our mother in her last year. It wasn't care, it was control. I looked up. Why would the hospital need a directive that gives Garrick authority over my estate? That has nothing to do with treatment. Her smile faltered. "Aileen, don't start getting paranoid. It's just easier if—" As I adjusted the stack of papers, something slipped from between the pages and landed on the blanket. A sticky note, yellow. I froze, handwritten. I didn't have to pick it up to recognize the handwriting. It was hers. It said, "Have her sign before Thursday. G wants confirmation." My hand moved faster than hers. I palmed the note and slid it under my pillow. She stiffened, then forced a laugh. "That's just a reminder for myself. Nothing to do with you." I met her eyes. Interesting kind of reminder. She leaned forward, her voice lower, more clipped. "That's private." "So is my estate." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "What happens Thursday, Shanda?" I asked calmly. She blinked. "What?" "You wrote it. You said to get confirmation by Thursday." "Why Thursday?" she stammered. "It's just a deadline, to stay on top of things." I let the silence stretch. "What happens Thursday?" I repeated. Her lips tightened. And then, with a shrug so practiced it felt rehearsed, she said, "Look, the doctors gave you a timeline. We need things in order before then." It felt like a slap I saw coming but couldn't avoid. She was dressing it up in practicality, but the rot underneath was impossible to miss. This wasn't about helping me. It was about preparing for what she hoped was inevitable. I studied her face, the same one I used to look up to when we were kids, the same sister who taught me to curl my hair with soup cans and who used to sneak me cookies from the top shelf. But that version of her was long gone, or maybe it never really existed. I handed the folder back to her without signing a single page. "I'm not signing anything today." She blinked, genuinely surprised by the firmness in my voice. "You're being difficult for no reason." "I'll review it with my attorney first." The blood drained from her cheeks. She took a step back. "A lawyer? Why would you—" "We're family, Aileen." I held her gaze. "Exactly." The word landed harder than I expected. She stood there a moment longer, unsure of whether to push or retreat. Then she snatched the folder off the bed, her hands moving too fast for someone trying to look casual. As she turned toward the door, her shoulders were rigid, her heels clicking harder than necessary on the floor. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look back. Once the door closed, I stayed still for a few seconds, letting the tension bleed out. I pulled the sticky note from under my pillow and read it again. "Have her sign before Thursday. G wants confirmation." Proof, real, undeniable proof that this wasn't just paranoia or suspicion. They were orchestrating this, together. I folded the note and slid it into the back of the prepaid phone case, tucking it behind the battery for safekeeping. Thursday. What were they planning? What was I supposed to be gone before? The hallway outside was calm now. The usual hospital hum, machines beeping, someone's laugh echoing down the corridor, cartwheeling by. But in here, the air had shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. I looked at the silver-blue handkerchief resting on the tray table. I hadn't reached for it once during the entire exchange. My hands were steady. My voice had stayed calm. They expected me to crumble. They didn't realize I'd already started rebuilding myself from the inside out. It was a text from an unknown number, and the moment I read it, I knew I wasn't the only one watching them. Your husband met with hospital admin this morning. Do not sign anything, not even routine forms. My fingers froze on the keypad. This time, the tremble wasn't from my illness. It was from something else, knowing I was being watched, but not in the way I feared, not alone. I swallowed back the rising panic and typed carefully, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who knows what they're planning. Keep your door locked." I stared at the screen, pulse drumming louder than the monitors beside me. My eyes flicked toward the door. It was shut, but now it felt too exposed. I pressed the side lock down slowly, gently, like I was afraid even the click might give me away. Whoever was texting me wasn't just guessing. They knew Garrick had met with hospital administrators this morning. That wasn't the kind of detail you stumbled on, which meant whoever this was, they were here, in the building, watching them, watching me. And for the first time in days, I wasn't entirely alone. The phone, small and warm in my hand, became my anchor. I clutched it tight and slid it under the covers. My mind raced, making connections I wasn't ready to admit. They'd moved so quickly, Garrick and Shanda, already meeting staff, planting documents, trying to put decisions into motion behind my back. The walls of the room suddenly felt thinner. The hospital hum outside, soft wheels on linoleum, muffled voices at the nurse's station, sounded distant, like another world I wasn't part of. I sank into the mattress, and the weight of it all collapsed on top of me. The betrayals, the hidden signatures, the calls that never reached me, the lies they told with smiles on their faces. I had held up so well these past few days, at least outwardly. Inside, I was unraveling. The exhaustion I'd been fending off hit me like a tide. I turned my head toward the ceiling, nothing special about it, just clean white tiles with dots that faded in and out if I stared long enough. But I kept looking, as if it would answer the questions circling inside me. Why am I the only one protecting my life? I whispered the words aloud, almost afraid they'd echo. No one answered. I let out a slow, cracking breath. For once I didn't try to be strong. Not for the nurses, not for Beata, not even for myself. I didn't need a mirror to know I looked frail. But for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it, to admit it. This body, my body, it was tired. Not just from illness, but from being under siege. I closed my eyes, tears pooling, then slipping sideways into my hair. I hated crying. It always made me feel like I'd lost something I couldn't get back. But the phone buzzed again. They think you're too weak to notice. They're wrong. I blinked, sat up slightly, clutched the cheap phone with renewed purpose. Someone believed me, someone was watching, and that someone wasn't just aware, they were angry too. Angry enough to warn me. That single message breathed oxygen back into me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. They were wrong about me. I looked toward the hallway again. Who had walked past earlier with that clipboard? Who had paused outside my room longer than they should have? Who left that sticky note Shanda dropped? I didn't know yet, but they were here. A jolt of dizziness pulled me from my thoughts. My head went light, the room tilting slightly to the left. I grabbed the side rail and closed my eyes, trying to will the vertigo away. My body, already worn thin, wasn't keeping up with my mind's urgency. I reached for the nurse call button. Seconds passed, then minutes. No one came. My chest tightened, not with pain, but panic. A very human kind that had nothing to do with disease and everything to do with helplessness. I fumbled for the silver blue handkerchief and clutched it hard, needing something, anything to hold on to. I whispered to myself, shaky and hoarse, I can't fall apart now, not when I finally know the truth. The door opened a crack, and a nurse I didn't recognize stepped in. Young, new, maybe in training. She moved with caution. She checked the monitors first, then picked up the tablet hanging beside my bed. Her brow furrowed. I watched her. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "It says here you refused hydration therapy this morning." I blinked. "I did what?" She showed me the screen. There it was, my name next to a note. Patient refused IV fluids. Confirmed by patient at 7:22 a.m. The air thinned again. "That's not true," I said, the words trembling but sharp. "I didn't refuse anything." The nurse tilted her head. "You're sure? It has your digital signature." "Let me see it." She turned the tablet toward me. I studied the signature. It looked like mine, but off. Too straight. Missing the curl I always added to the A. That curl was muscle memory. I hadn't dropped it in 40 years. Someone had forged it. "I didn't sign that," I said, "and I didn't refuse anything." She looked at me, unsettled now. This wasn't entered through our normal protocol. No nurse name, no badge ID. I met her eyes. "That's because someone doesn't want me hydrated." She didn't respond, but her silence told me she knew this wasn't routine. I slumped back against the pillow, clutching the blanket. The rage was different now, not hot, but cold and clear. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were trying to make me die, with small things, quiet things. Things no one would question if they didn't know what to look for. The tears came again, but this time not from sadness, from clarity, from anger, from the overwhelming realization that I had to fight harder than I ever had, not for healing, but for the right to stay alive long enough to defend myself. I covered my face with the handkerchief and let myself break, just for a minute. My shoulders shook. My chest ached with the pressure of holding everything in for too long. Then I stopped, pulled the cloth down, and breathed. If they were trying this hard, it meant I still had something they feared. That meant I still had power. I grabbed the phone again, texted Lyle. "Someone altered my chart. This is bigger than we thought." Then I pressed the button for Beata. When she arrived, I didn't explain much. I just said, "Stay close. And don't let anyone in this room unless I say so. No one." She nodded, eyes wide, voice steady. "You got it." She sat down near the corner of the room, the air between us thick with unspoken understanding. I leaned back, watching the sliver of hallway I could see through the window. The game had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. I pressed the backlight of the phone off and whispered into the stillness. "No more surprises. I'm watching now too." But less than an hour later, Garrick walked in with a smile and a witness. And the moment I saw who followed him into the room, my stomach dropped. Garrick stepped through the doorway first, wearing the face he saved for neighbors and holiday photos. Calm, caring, the kind of expression that used to comfort me once upon a time. Today it felt like a mask glued on too tight. Behind him stood a man in a stiff suit with a clipboard pressed to his chest, like a shield. Garrick's voice floated across the room. "Honey, look who came to help clear up some paperwork confusion." Help. That word again. The administrator, Mr. Dalka, according to the badge on his lapel, offered a polite nod without warmth. His eyes flicked around the room, landing on my chart, the side table, the monitor, then finally me. He looked like a man sent to deliver bad news, but determined to pretend it was routine. "Mrs. Merrick," he said, stepping closer, "we wanted to make sure everything on your file is updated properly. There were a few authorizations that need your signature." My pulse kicked up, coordinated, planned, just like the text warned. I didn't move. "What kind of authorizations?" "Routine medical policy updates," he answered, too quickly. "Which policy?" He blinked, then rattled off a string of administrative jargon that meant nothing to me, or to him, if his stiff posture said anything. I let a slow breath in. Then it should be simple to show me the policy in writing. Dalka paused. His jaw tightened. It's standard procedure. I gave him the same calm look I used to give board members when they tried to slip in terms they didn't want questioned. Then let me read it. Behind him, Garrick's smile flattened. Just a fraction. Aileen, he said, voice tightening. They're trying to help you. Why make this harder than it needs to be? I turned toward him. Why bring a hospital administrator instead of a doctor if this is about my care? Dalka shifted his weight. Garrick jumped in. Sweetheart, please. You're under stress. You're confused. No, I said quietly. I'm not. I kept my voice level, exactly the way Lyle coached me. Calm, measured, impossible to twist. I'm happy to sign anything after my attorney reviews it. Both men froze. Dalka's confidence faltered for the first time. Garrick's eyes sharpened. Your attorney? Since when do you need— I didn't let him finish. Since someone entered a false note into my chart claiming I refused treatment. Dalka stiffened as if someone had pulled a string straight down his spine. Mrs. Merrick, we can discuss that separately. I'm sure we can, I said, letting the words hang. In the right setting, with the right documentation. He blinked, realizing I wasn't the fragile patient he expected. Garrick stepped closer, lowering his voice while trying to keep the smile for anyone passing in the hall. Aileen, you're making a scene for no reason. You're sick. You need help. I held his gaze. Then why are you pushing paperwork instead of asking about my treatment? He exhaled sharply, caught. Dalka shuffled through his folder and placed a form on my tray table. This is the main document we need addressed today. The title at the top might as well have been written in flames. Temporary Medical Decision Authority Transfer. Exactly what Shandaw tried to get me to sign. I slid the paper back to him with 2 fingers. No. Dalka attempted a polite smile. It didn't reach his eyes. Garrick didn't bother pretending this time. Aileen, he snapped, stop acting paranoid. I straightened my back, ignoring the strain in my ribs. I said no. Right then, a nurse walked by and paused in the doorway, catching the last line. Perfect. I raised my voice just slightly. Not yelling, not emotional, just clear. For the record, I am not signing any authority transfers. I never refused treatment, and I will not be pressured into anything. The nurse's eyes widened. I'll document that, she said quietly. Garrick turned toward her too sharply. This is a misunderstanding. I meant every word, I cut in. The nurse nodded once and stepped away, likely to note the interaction. For the first time since all this began, Garrick looked genuinely shaken. Just a flicker, but enough. The first crack in his control. He leaned in close, dropping the fake charm. You're putting people in a difficult position. I kept my tone even. Only the people trying to take advantage of me. His nostrils flared. Then I lifted the prepaid phone from under my blanket and set it gently on the tray where both men could see it. I didn't unlock it or turn it on. I didn't need to. Garrick's eyes flickered with something raw. Fear, panic, uncertainty. He had no idea what I'd recorded, what I'd sent, or who I'd contacted. Dalka swallowed hard. We'll return at a more appropriate time. They left in a hurry, each trying to look in control, both failing. When the door shut, I let my shoulders fall back against the pillows. My heartbeat was still racing, but it was different now. Thunder instead of tremor. I reached for the silver blue handkerchief, but not because I needed comfort. I needed grounding. That, I whispered, was only the first round. A minute passed, maybe 2. I exhaled long and slow, letting the adrenaline ebb just enough for my muscles to loosen. Then the door clicked softly. Beata slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her. She looked pale, eyes wide, like she'd seen something she shouldn't have. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "They're not done, and you need to see this." Beata reached into her apron pocket with trembling fingers, pulling out something that made my chest go cold. She looked toward the door, then silently crossed the room and drew the blinds shut. Her movements were quick but careful, like someone trying not to be seen even in plain view. The moment the blinds clicked closed, the energy in the room shifted. She turned back to me, voice just above a whisper. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," she said, setting her phone gently on the edge of my blanket. "I was cleaning the hallway. They didn't see me." I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Her thumb hovered over the screen, then tapped play. The audio was fuzzy at first, shoes on tile, the slight echo of a hospital hallway. But then Garrick's voice came through, low and clipped. "She won't last the week. The doctors already said 5 days. We just need her calm and cooperative so we can finish the paperwork." The words landed like punches to the chest. I couldn't breathe. Then Shandaw's voice, cold and clinical, slid in. "Then keep her stressed. Stress weakens her heart. You know that." I tasted metal in my mouth. My hand gripped the sheet as if I could wring the sound out of it. Garrick again, sharper this time. "As soon as Dalka gets the signature, the house transfers, and we move fast on the accounts. If she refuses, we'll say she's mentally unstable from the meds." Beata's face was pale. I knew something was off, but hearing that, my throat tightened. My hand found the silver blue handkerchief beside me. I didn't even realize I was holding it until the cool fabric pressed against my palm. They weren't just waiting, they were pushing, urging my body to fail, manipulating the stress, the system, my diagnosis. Every ache, every skipped heartbeat, helped along by people who were supposed to care. I blinked hard, trying to stay focused. "Why did you come straight to me?" Beata's voice cracked. "Because someone has to, and you can't fight this alone." I reached for my prepaid phone and messaged Lyle. "Check the hospital system. Something's happening." His reply came seconds later. "Legal notice board. Look now." Beata wheeled over the hospital laptop. I logged into my patient portal, hands shaking, and clicked through to the administrative notices. There it was. Filed 1 hour ago. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Petitioner, Garrick Hale. I stared at the screen as if it might vanish if I blinked, but it stayed, black and white and very, very real. I clicked into the document. His claims ran down the page like acid. Patient has exhibited mental confusion. Refusal of essential care. Emotional instability under medication. Likely to harm self or others. Every sentence was a lie. The petition was backed by a statement signed by none other than Mr. Dalka. I whispered, "He's trying to make it official before I can fight back." Beata leaned in. "He wants you gone, and he's not waiting anymore." Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. A sharp knock, then the door cracked open. "Ma'am," one of the security guards said, peering in. "We received a report of aggressive behavior and potential self-harm. We just need to check in with you." Beata's hand tightened on the railing of the bed. I could see it in her eyes. She knew exactly what was happening. "They're trying to get you restrained," she whispered. "Keep you quiet." I forced myself to breathe, to sit tall. I folded the handkerchief in my lap, hands steady even if my pulse wasn't. "Yes," I said, addressing the guards calmly. "I feel safe, but I'm being targeted by my husband, who just filed a false emergency guardianship petition in an attempt to seize control of my medical decisions." One of the guards blinked. "You..." "What?" "I have legal counsel, and I have evidence of coercion including an audio recording made on this floor. I paused. Would you like to hear it? The second guard looked to the first, unsure. Neither moved closer. I could see the cracks forming in their composure. Beata added quietly, "It's true. She's telling the truth. I heard the conversation too." They hesitated. Then one said, "We'll need to confirm this with administration. Please stay in the room while we do." "We'll be here," I said, "and I suggest you log the source of that complaint for when this becomes a legal matter." The door closed again. For a long beat, I stared at it. The air felt tight. But something had shifted. I turned to Beta. "He's going to escalate. This won't be the end of it." She nodded. "Then I'll stay. I don't care what it costs." Her voice broke a little on that last word, and it gutted me. I wasn't used to kindness anymore. Not real kindness. Not from someone who had nothing to gain. I picked up the phone and typed a message to Lyle. "Emergency guardianship filed. Need next step." His reply came instantly. Then we moved to Phase 2. My breath caught. I didn't know what Phase 2 meant exactly. But whatever it was time. The phone buzzed again in my hand, a second message from Lyle coming in hot. But before I could read it, the door opened once more. Garrick stepped inside like he owned the place, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot. He didn't smile with his mouth, just with his eyes, the kind of smile that said he already believed he'd won. "It's over, Aileen," he said smoothly. "You're not walking out of here in control." But as he stepped closer, something in his expression told me he hadn't expected me to fight back this hard. He dragged the chair across the tile floor with that smug slowness he always used when he wanted to intimidate me. He sat down beside the bed, spreading his knees, lacing his fingers together. His gaze was steady, calculated, but there was a tension around his mouth he couldn't quite hide. "You could have made this easy," he said, voice low. "But you always had to be difficult." I tilted my head slightly, watching him. "You mean I refused to die quietly?" His jaw flexed. For a moment he didn't say a word. Then he leaned in, elbows on his knees. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The companies, the loans, our image. Shonda and I have handled everything while you've just drifted." Drifted. The word dropped like a brick in my chest. I felt it hit, but it didn't sink. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just let the silence stretch. He mistook it for surrender. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a folded packet of paper and set it on my lap like a gift he expected me to be grateful for. "This is the updated will, signed 2 months ago. Everything's in order." I looked down. My name stared back at me in bold lettering. "Last Will and Testament of Aileen Hale." Except the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It looked close, almost perfect, but it wasn't. My lungs went still. He leaned back, satisfied. "Once the guardianship is finalized, the court will recognize this. The house, the accounts, they're all protected. From you, from any confusion you might cause." He tapped the forged signature like it was a done deal. "See, you already agreed." I didn't raise my voice. "That's a felony," I said. Garrick smiled faintly. "Only if someone proves it." I pushed the packet toward him with one finger. "Keep it. I'll need it for the investigation." His smile twitched, faltered. He hadn't expected that. He stood suddenly, pacing in short bursts, running his hand through his hair. "You really think some small-time attorney is going to save you? Lyle is nothing. I can make him disappear." I watched him pace, then said, almost conversationally, "Funny, he said the same about you." That stopped him cold. I reached for my prepaid phone and pressed a single button. The screen lit up. I placed it on the blanket between us. His gaze locked on it. "What did you do?" "Everything you said today, recorded. That hallway conversation with Shanda, on file. Sent to Lyle, sent to the court. He barked a laugh, but it came out wrong, strained. You're lying! I tilted the screen toward him. A blinking audio file glowed red. Try me. In a blur, he reached for the phone. But before he could grab it, a voice cut through the air. Sir, step away from the patient. Beata stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her voice steady. And just behind her, a hospital security officer filled the frame. Garrick froze. Slowly, he let go of the phone and placed it on the table beside me. Beata stepped into the room fully, her stance unwavering. I heard what he said, she told the guard, and I think you should too. I didn't miss the guard's subtle nod. Then I spoke, loud and clear, for everyone to hear. This morning, Mr. Dalka attempted to coerce me into signing over medical authority, under false pretenses. Garrick turned toward me like I'd slapped him. I have documentation, I continued, and I'm requesting immediate contact with hospital leadership. The security guard took a slow step forward. I'll call it in. Garrick's face paled. You think this ends with a nurse and a guard? He snapped. You think one lawyer and a prepaid phone scare me? I leaned back against the pillows. No, I think you made one fatal mistake. He narrowed his eyes. You underestimated the woman you tried to erase. His face tightened, jaw clenched so hard, I thought his teeth might crack. The room buzzed, heavy with everything unsaid. Then another guard entered and said, Mrs. Hale, hospital administration is requesting your presence on a secure video call. Right now. I looked at Garrick and said, Then let's finish this. The screen flickered to life, and the faces staring back at me were not the allies Garrick expected. The chief medical officer sat in the center frame, his posture rigid, eyes steady. To his left was a woman in a tailored navy suit, hospital legal counsel. On the right, a middle-aged man with a badge clipped to his shirt pocket that read, Patient Safety Officer. None of them looked amused. None of them looked rushed. Garrick's bravado cracked. His smile faltered. Just a fraction, but I saw it. I adjusted my position in the chair, slowly, deliberately. Beata had helped me into the telemedicine room moments earlier. A nurse had brought in a bottle of water. I hadn't touched it. I didn't need anything clouding this moment. My hand rested lightly on the silver-blue handkerchief in my lap. We've reviewed the reports from this morning, the CMO began, his voice formal but not cold, including the concern regarding coercive guardianship proceedings. She's confused. Garrick cut in immediately, leaning forward, palms out like a man offering reason. She's ill. She doesn't understand what's happening, and You will wait until you are addressed, Mr. Hale, the attorney said sharply. The silence after her words rang louder than his interruption. Garrick sat back, color rising in his cheeks. I inhaled through my nose, slow and even. When they turned to me, I nodded once. I'll be brief, I said. I told them about Dalka, about the folder dropped in my lap without explanation, about Garrick pressuring me to sign, about the false reports to hospital security, claiming I was a danger to myself. I described the forged will he'd tried to pass off as mine. I explained how the guardianship petition had been filed without my knowledge, based on lies. Then I said, I've submitted the recordings to your legal inbox through my attorney. You should have them now. The attorney opened her laptop and clicked a few keys. She gave a small nod. Then the room on the other side of the screen went still. And then, the voices played. Garrick's voice, sharp, dismissive. She won't last the week. Just keep her calm so we can get the paperwork through. Shandaw. Then keep her stressed. Stress weakens the heart. And the final blow, his voice again, cold and flat. If she refuses, we'll say she's unstable. The meds are an easy excuse. The screen was silent. My throat burned, but I stayed quiet. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but I waited. The patient safety officer cleared his throat. This is a violation of ethical standards and a serious breach of patient rights. The lawyer added, the administrator will be suspended immediately pending a formal investigation. I could feel it. Justice, finally breathing in the room. Garrick didn't speak. For once, he had no performance ready. His silence no longer held power. It was just absence. Then the CMO looked at me directly. Mrs. Hale, do you feel safe with Mr. Hale remaining in this facility? I hesitated only a second. No, I said. I don't. The words came out quieter than I expected, but I meant them. They didn't shake. I'd carried the fear so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to speak without it weighing down my chest. But the moment I said it, I don't feel safe. Something heavy lifted. Not all of it, but enough. Garrick snapped back into motion. She's lying. She's making this up. She's delusional. Security has already confirmed discrepancies in your incident reports, the attorney interrupted. I noticed a guard step closer to him, just to his right. His shoulders sank, not in defeat, but in a kind of implosion. His whole body seemed to cave in on itself. I watched the man I once married fall apart, not with shouting, but with silence, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, hollowed out. But I wasn't broken. The CMO spoke again. Mr. Hale will be removed from the hospital grounds, effective immediately. The guardianship petition will be challenged with evidence submitted today. An independent medical advocate will be assigned to your case, Mrs. Hale, to ensure your care remains your decision. I nodded. Thank you. No cheering, no smiles, just clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. Garrick was escorted out quietly. He looked back once at the doorway. His face held too many things to name. Rage, maybe. But behind that, something that almost looked like fear or regret. I waited for a wave of satisfaction, but it never came. Instead, something slower moved in. A sadness I didn't invite. A grief not for him, but for the version of myself who once trusted him, who had loved him, who had defended him to everyone, even herself. When the door closed behind him, Beata stepped inside, cautious. She sat down beside me, folding her hands in her lap. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. I turned to her. It had to be. She nodded once. No smile, just understanding. There was a soft knock, and my cardiologist entered the room. He looked tired, but kinder than I'd ever seen him. I wanted to clarify something, he began. Those early 5-day estimates, they were based on incomplete data. Your recent tests show a different picture. My breath caught. He continued, Your heart is strained, yes. But there is improvement, stabilization. Your condition is serious, but not immediately terminal. I stared at him, not trusting my own ears. So, I'm not dying? He shook his head. You have time, more than you were led to believe. For a second, the air in the room felt too thick to breathe. Then I exhaled, and it was like I exhaled months of fear with it. They hadn't just been trying to control me. They'd been trying to bury me while I was still alive. I reached for the handkerchief in my lap. It didn't feel like a lifeline anymore. It felt like proof. I had lived through it. I picked up my phone and dialed. Lyle answered on the first ring. It's done. I'm ready for the next phase, I said. Then let's rebuild your life, your way. Beata smiled at me through glassy eyes. You won't be cleaning houses much longer, I told her. She let out a short laugh, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. Outside the hospital window, the sun dipped low. The city bathed in orange and gold light, softening the skyline into something warm and steady. I whispered to myself, I wasn't saved. I fought my way back.